Yes.
First two is for candidate countries.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you very much. I asked the question what I want to speak about now is what will be the second component of IPA. The examples that I have shown to you for Bosnia and Herzegovina was of first one, institution building and systems, but I skipped this partly to read this yourself. So what is cross-border cooperation, or speaking about money cross-border financing programs? Basically, this means that European Union within the framework of IPA and also within the framework actually of gives money for cooperation across borders of the European Union. So here, I put here part of European territorial cooperation and cohesion policy. This is the official word for this. You don't see IPA in this sense, but there is also part of IPA, as we have said, that deals with cross-border programs. So it's cooperation between different countries across the borders. And this does not mean that in general a country like Bulgaria, let me say, can work together with Romania. Cross-border programs are focused on border regions. So this means in this program, for example, the region of Sofia cannot participate in cross-border programs. It should be rather the region in the north of Sofia, of Bulgaria. If you know a bit Bulgaria, for example, Russe, big city at the Danube. This is part of cross-border programs. The goal is that regions and cities from different EU member states, and I add here candidate countries, can work together and learn from each other through joint programs, projects and networks. This means in some way the goal of the European Union is to reduce the importance of borders. And there are various programs. You see here a lot of numbers. 53 cross-border cooperation programs across or along internal EU borders. So each cross-border program is one single program. For example, I mentioned Bulgaria and Romania. I will come to Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. So the cooperation program between Bulgaria and Romania at the border is one single program. There is also another program, Bulgaria and Macedonia. There's also one cross-border program, but different. Because of this, we have so many. Then we have programs where several countries work together. 13 transnational cooperation programs that cover larger areas. Now I confess I copied this from European Union website. Because of this, you see some parts here, Baltic Sea, the Alpine region, the Mediterranean region. There is also a cross-border program for the Black Sea region that brings together all countries around the Black Sea. Then we have an Adriatic program in which Bosnia and Herzegovina can participate. And then we have larger programs, and I will briefly present to you one of these larger programs that are open to 27 member states and to candidate countries. So this is the basic idea of cross-border programs to make organizations, mostly public organizations actually, close to the border in different countries work together. Now how is this managed? This is called shared management with a single management authority. You remember that I mentioned before decentralized management and centralized management. Here we have, at least for member states, so-called shared management. This means, for example, Bulgaria and Romania, again, two European Union member states. We have in each country one ministry that is responsible for management of the funds. So this could be, depending on the type of the program, the regional development ministry in Bulgaria, the same in Romania, and they share this. It will be it's a bit different for candidate countries. There we have rather centralized management. I will come to this. Then we have a single set of rules for all partners, so the same partners in both countries have to follow the same rules, and we have calls for proposals. Now here there is a difference. I told you before, for this institution building and transition assistance components, we have tenders. And I mentioned the example that the Faculty of Information Technology is participating in a project for PKI, Public Key Infrastructure for e-government. So there was a tender for this. Here, in this case, we have calls for proposals. A tender means that the winner of the tender has to carry out some work for the government, software implementation, conceptual or whatever. Here, in this case, everybody or organizations along the border can have some ideas what they want to do. For example, in the tourism sector, some associations and municipalities could get together and they want to say they establish a tourist path across the border with special signs, hiking marks, with maps, and so on. And this is not something that is done for the government, but for the benefit of this particular region. So this means a single call for proposals approved by the Joint Monitoring Committee and concerning the whole eligible area. And this call for proposals does not define individual projects, but rather big areas. For example, I mentioned something of tourist area, so that the call for proposals would say that there should be some projects for the development of cross-border tourism. And then individual organizations, I mentioned municipalities or associations, they should sit down and have specific ideas how to develop the tourism across the border. Okay? Now this is on the map. I mentioned that there are 35 cross-border programs between European Union member states. A little bit here. Let me only show, I mentioned Bulgaria, Romania, this is one program. Bulgaria, Greece, this is another program, and so on. And you find on the list of on the website of the European Commission this big list, and what you see is that Bosnia-Herzegovina is not included, but for example, the list is not complete actually. We have here Fyrom or the Republic of Macedonia. There is also a program between Bulgaria and the Republic of Macedonia, Bulgaria and Serbia. Yes, it is here. Yes, here. There is an Adriatic IPA cross-border program and so on. So these are individual programs and the regions that can participate. Now I would think that you have the question, how about your country? So what is happening in Bosnia-Herzegovina? So I found out that there are 6 programs as part of these components. That means 3 bilateral cross-border cooperation programs in the border area between Croatia, Montenegro and Serbia. And then there is something called IPA Adriatic CBC program. This is a regional program of countries along the Adriatic Sea, and Bosnia-Herzegovina is part of this because we have a middle part on the seaside. So this was cross-border programs. Again, the basic idea is, let me say in my words, to reduce the importance of the borders. And you should understand, let me go back to the net, that when you look, for example, here, I said this, not the whole of Bulgaria can participate, but only some regions that are close to the border in Greek and the same in other countries, and the regions are counted on the NUTS 2 level. You remember what NUTS means? Nomenclature for Unified Territorial Statistics. Now, let me go on to one territorial cooperation program. There are several of them. I only want to mention one of them, and I'll show you the map. I told you that there is an Adriatic program, Black Sea program. This is called Southeast Europe Transnational Cooperation Program. Actually, it is finished already, and here I must say I don't know whether it will continue in a similar way after 2013, but nevertheless it is in theory very interesting. There are projects to be set up for this whole region. This means we have regular call for proposals. We had actually during the 7-year program 4 general calls for proposals, not so much at the end. And organizations working in these areas, public organizations, associations or NGOs, private companies, should get together from several countries, from many countries of the region actually, to propose ideas for projects. So this is an example for the transnational cooperation program, and the call for proposals has to be called for proposals, I should say, always for so-called priority axis, innovation, environment, accessibility, and sustainable growth area. Innovation, was mostly for the private sector actually. I mentioned this briefly because, as I said, this program is practically finished now. Projects are carried out, but it's very interesting. However, and I remind you of the programs that I have quoted earlier. This program, and I believe also the other programs in the same way, is very complicated. We have participated in several proposals, and I have to confess we never won any of these projects, but it was very difficult to prepare the proposal. This program is actually managed by one single authority that is situated in Budapest, in Hungary, and they define, of course together with the European Commission, they define the rules. And when you set up a proposal, they give you an Excel sheet, an empty Excel sheet, and you have to do everything in Excel, which, only to give an example, which I always found extremely complicated. Instead of writing something in Word as a free text, you should put the free text in some Excel cells. And I had other examples of organizations in Bulgaria who cancelled the contract during the execution of the project because it was administratively so difficult. And I know people who said to me that they had to do more during the project, more administrative work than technical work. So in theory, this is very interesting, but there are problems with administration and complex procedures, as I showed you the results of the survey before. Any question on this? Okay. What did we look at? Pre-accession funds with 5 components, with 1 legal and financial framework. I mentioned the operational programs that are the base for projects. This is based on multi-annual planning, and I spoke about the problems in accessing IPA funds in the same way that this related to structural funds. We have spoken about cross-border programs and territorial programs briefly. So you should understand what are beneficiary countries, whether you understand what I'm saying. Again, I'm trying to reduce this to simple terms and terminology, but nevertheless, it is up to you to see whether you really understand this. So let me continue with the structural funds. As I said before, structural funds and IPA are managed in a very similar way. IPA is for candidate countries, and as soon as a candidate country becomes a member of the European Union, this country becomes a member of the structural funds. So what I want to do in a similar way as for IPA, to present to you the basic principles, that you understand the aims, the background of the structural funds, that you understand how they work, and that you have an overview. So I can do this maybe a bit quicker because again it is rather similar to IPA, and it is the same structure, goals and backgrounds, funds and objectives. This is actually different and a bit difficult to understand, at least I find this, or found this in the past. Who are the beneficiaries and then how it is implemented. So the background, which I mentioned yesterday very briefly, you have seen the same picture. The background is that there is a lot of difference between the regions in Europe. We have a lot of regional disparities. And although Europe is one rich geographic area, I can say, we have in Europe many areas which are rather poor. And the way to measure this, to measure the wealth for European Commission, is the GDP, the gross domestic product, and comparing the gross domestic product of some regions, and again on the NUTS 2 level, this is the regions they are looking at. The European Union discovers that there are very rich regions and very poor regions, and what they want to do is to reduce these differences between the regions. So this is the background of the structural funds. And now, the structural funds, as they were defined in 2007, have 3 objectives. And this is now very important to understand. Without understanding of these objectives, and we'll come to the funds then, it is difficult to understand the way how this works. We have 3 objectives. First, convergence objective. Secondly, regional competitiveness and employment objective. And third, European territorial cooperation objective. And this is the major difference, I would say, also to IPA. In IPA we have the 5 components. Here we have 3 objectives. Now what does it mean? Convergence objectives. What means convergence? Convergence is in some way similar to the word cohesion. This means less developed regions should converge towards the better developed regions. So what the convergence objective aims at is to accelerate the convergence of the less developed EU member states and regions by improving growth and employment conditions. Which regions are concerned? Those where GDP per capita is below 75% of the EU average. We see this in the map. We have in the map the dark red and the rose regions, which is more or less this part here. We have parts here and some smaller parts in the rest of Europe. But the conversion objective is valid for those kind of regions. So in what the purposes of the objective is to accelerate the economic development of these regions. And within this objective there are some priorities: human and physical capital, innovation, knowledge society, environment, and administrative efficiency. Now these are different words from the words that we had in IPA, but I would say that nevertheless what's behind the words is very similar. Administrative efficiency. before we spoke about institution building. Environment is now something that is very important for the European Union, protection of the environment, and here knowledge society. We have information technology as a base for economic development together with innovation. The budget, we don't need to remember this, but it's the largest objective that we have. For each of these objectives, a budget assigned worth a little more than 80% of the whole structural funds. So this is the most important part, or the most important objective of the structural funds. Then the next one, called regional competitiveness and employment objectives. Basically, this is something for better developed regions, and we see here, let's say this immediately. This covers all regions not covered by the convergence objective. This means this is for the better developed region. The financing is smaller. We had here 283 billion euro. Here we have 55 trillion euro. And here they want to promote or anticipate economic, social change, promote innovation, entrepreneurship, environmental protection, development of labor market. So again, in some way you see the same words, the environment, innovation, entrepreneurship. The goal is on the regional level to promote, to develop competitiveness of European Union. This means what you don't see here directly is at the end to create more jobs. So regional competitiveness and employment objectives for the richer regions. Third, European territorial cooperation objectives. And here, geographically, this is valid for all the regions. So here we don't have a distinction or a threshold of the GDP per capita. And you see, this is a very small fund, only 2.5%. And here we have, again, as an IPA, cross-border, transnational, and interregional level. So these are more or less, let me say, cross-border programs at European Union level, territorial programs at European Union level. We have programs, urban, rural development, coastal development, and development of companies, mostly SMEs. So these are three objectives, and this is the base. Two of them are allocated to the regions. Third one, territorial cooperation objectives, is valid for all the regions. And we see this a bit on this picture, on this map. We have here the red regions. This is the convergence objective. We have the blue regions for the regional competitiveness and employment regions. And the third one, as I said, is valid for all the regions. So then what we see here on this map is something that is maybe also a bit difficult to understand. Phasing out eligibility under convergence objective. Phasing in eligibility under regional competitiveness and employment objective. You don't need to remember this, but let me nevertheless explain this. We have in the European Union the GDP per capita as the main measuring figure. Now, and 2007, Bulgaria and Romania became member of the European Union. This means before Bulgaria and Romania joined the European Union, there was a certain GDP average, but Bulgaria and Romania are poor countries. So after they joined the European Union, all the figures changed. This means the average GDP per capita dropped, got lower. So as a consequence, all these regions had to be redefined. Not all of them, but some of them. So as a consequence that this average GDP got lower, some what the European Commission did, is they defined a kind of compromise, and they said, okay, these regions that were before eligible for the convergence objective, but now they have a higher GDP, they are allowed to still get funds from the convergence objectives. And these are called phasing out. And there are some of these regions. You see the region Spain, Sardinia. We have regions in Greece. I believe that also Thessaloniki in the north of Greece should be one of them. Yeah, phasing out stability. So this is some, I would say, compromise that the European Union has invented for the transition of these regions. Again, you might read this in the context of the structural funds, so you may remember, but you don't need to remember this at the moment. Okay? So 3 objectives. Now, the point is, we have these objectives, and I told you we have money allocated to objectives. But these objectives don't give directly money, and this is the bit of complication for the structural funds. In the structural funds, we have actually really funds, and you get the money from the funds, not from the objectives. And again, I must say, I find this a bit difficult to understand, but this is how it is set up. So we have funds. We have 3 different funds: European Regional Development Fund, European Social Fund, and the Cohesion Fund. So what is this? What does the European Regional Development Fund do? They want to give money to improve the wealth of the region. This means to correct imbalances between regions. So here we have, as an example, 8 investments in companies to create sustainable jobs, infrastructure development, for example, bridges or better energy transport, maybe energy plants. There are financial instruments like capital risk funds, local development funds for specific purposes, and technical assistance measures, which means practically consulting to governments. European Regional Development Fund, and here we cannot say that this fund is allocated to specific regions. I will come back to this later, but basically all the regions can get money from the European Regional Development Fund, and the money allocated for the 7 years is 201 billion euro. European Social Fund, this is money to create better employment and job opportunities. So here we are speaking about companies, workers and enterprises. We have lifelong learning schemes. We have funds in order to improve efficiency of working in enterprises. We have funds to help those that look for jobs. Funds for disadvantaged people, for combating discrimination in the job market. And again, here we have, what was it? Lifelong learning schemes, this is what I was looking for. Here we have also reforming education systems and setting up a network of teaching establishments, mostly in the area of vocational training. We have here 76 billion euro, before we had 201, so this is less. Again, this is valid for all regions, employment and job opportunities. So, the Cohesion Fund. And here we have a precision of the regions. This is for member states, and I emphasize member states, not regions, whose gross national income per inhabitant is less than 90% of the community average. I took this definition from European Commission websites, and I confess I cannot answer the question why now we are speaking about gross national income per inhabitant and not anymore trans-European transport networks. There are so-called transport corridors in Europe where roads are built that cross the whole or the major part of the continent. I believe in Bosnia and Herzegovina we have also such part of a major road. I've seen that highway is built from Croatia into Bosnia. Then we have projects for the environment, energy, transport, energy efficiency, renewable energy, developing rail transport, and so on, with a budget of 70 billion euro. So what you see here, I would say mostly infrastructure projects, to build up infrastructure, considering also environmental protection, with a purpose to stabilize the economy. Now, I think this sounds all a bit abstract, but it has been defined in this way by the European Union. What is important now is the question, how do the objectives relate to the funds? And I remind you, these objectives that you see here on the left side, these are defined for the regions. Cohesion objective, maximum 75% of GDP per capita. This is valid for all regions, and here we had, if I remember correctly, 90%. So the European Regional Development Fund is valid for all objectives, which also means that all countries in Europe can receive money from the European Regional Development Fund, and this was also previously. European Social Fund, this was the one that deals with employment, is valid for convergence objective and the regional competitiveness and employment objective. And as you remember, this means practically also for the whole of Europe. Now, we have on the right-hand side the cohesion funds. I call this a bit infrastructure development for the less developed regions. And this cohesion fund gives money only to the convergence objective. So this is, let me say, the basic philosophy of the structural funds. And if you want to work with the structural funds, then you have to understand this basic schemes, objective and funds. As I said, that was may also find it difficult. In IPA we have just the 5 components. I find this much easier to understand than here. But they are defined in this way. And overall the purpose is to support the development of the regions. It means to support, to reduce the disparities of the regions. So this is the basics, and again, for structural funds you have to understand this. Any question here? No? No, okay. So what you should recall, what you should remember is not all the details, but you should remember that there are 3 objectives in one sentence, and I think I've put it on the slides. What is the major aim of these objectives? The same for the funds and how they relate to each other. Now you could argue that this is valid for today, because this multi-annual financial framework ends this year, and maybe next year we will have something completely different. It is not true. The worlds will change, and I will show you in one slide at the end how it will change, but the basics, this will remain the same for the structural funds. Okay? So what I would like to get to now is how are the structural funds managed? And again, we have similar things as in IPA now. We have multi-annual programming, concentration of financial resources means practically these 3 funds. We have a partnership between the European Commission and the national government. which is called shared responsibilities. On one side, European Commission, on the other side, national or maybe even regional authorities. Then, something important that the European Commission calls additionality, which means practically co-financing. You remember before I said for IPA, 20% co-financing. This is the same for the structural funds, and this is meant for this. EU resources are additional to the national effort. This means that governments, national governments, have to finance part of the activities. Now this, I said already, the current program period ends end of this year. Now what is the approach? And this is similar. We have community strategic guidelines on European level. We have on the national level a national strategic reference framework and operational programs. I will show you soon how this works in Bulgaria, that you get better. So we have again operational programs, and these operational programs define on a yearly basis what should be done in a country or in a region. We have shared responsibility. I mentioned this already. Important is here the word monitoring. This means you may understand we have the multi-annual planning. We get to the operational programs, and then projects can start. This is correct, but nevertheless, European Commission does not withdraw them. They play a monitoring role. The European Commission checks how the funds are allocated, and you may have heard, for example, in the case of Bulgaria and also Romania, the funds were at one stage stopped to these countries because of corruption. Now this is the program cycle. We have the national plan defined for a period of 7 years. Then we have specific programs which I call operational programs that publishers call for tenders or call for proposals. Then we have done by the government day-to-day management. We have projects that are executed mostly not by the government, but by beneficiaries. The government, European Commission monitors it and evaluates the results both on project level and on program level. Now, who are the beneficiaries? I don't have the word beneficiary here. But this is something, yes, here this beneficiary. This is something that you should remember. Somebody who gets money from the European Union is called a beneficiary. Who can participate? More or less everybody. Practically speaking, most of the money goes to the government, not so much to businesses or association or voluntary groups. There are parts that go to these organizations, but most of the money actually is given, well, it's wrong to say to the government, but to public organizations, which could mean also regional authorities, local authorities, municipalities, and so on. So we have selection criteria when we have a call for proposals, projects are selected, and everything should be published. So European Union or European Commission requests the authorities to publish who gets the money. And you see this, there are websites, sometimes difficult to find, but you can see who is beneficial. Now, some examples. This is something that goes back to the previous period, but it could have happened in the same way today. So we have transport infrastructure, 47%. At that time, actually, SF stands for social fund. We have cohesion fund as well, but social fund has changed. So, as a result, Spain, Portugal have received a lot of money, and now their road density is higher than the EU average. Other examples focus on sustainability. That means something that can remain for the future. There were fast speed trains built for structural funds. We have tramway systems and the metro in Athens built. Also, by the way, the metro in Sofia is built for structural funds, but later than 2006. Then we have a lot of projects for the environment, protection of the environment, tourism development, and a lot of money goes to renewable energy, wind farms, solar cells, and so on. So these are some examples, and I want to show you some pictures. Tram systems in Athens. So here you see this was built for the structural funds. I copied this from somewhere and left also in the title a success story question mark. What it means basically that Greek people have built these tram systems, but it seems that it's not very heavily used. So there are question marks. So this was really for the benefit of the population. Other example, incubation center. So this is more the area of knowledge development and of innovation. This building was built for structural funds as an incubator. You know what an incubator is? Yes. Okay. Or we have a similar thing in the Czech Republic. As you see from the picture, it's still being built. Innovation center. It is called in the Czech Republic. We have such a motorway in San Sebastian in Spain that is built to see a big bridge. There's also the new motorway in Herzegovina that I have seen this week, which is being built. Have you seen this? Yes. Yeah. It looks impressive to me, and this is built of course to the top. It's not built. We have such a technology center, similar as before, innovation center or technology center in Burgenland, in Austria, which is focused on renewable energy, so a kind of research center. And now, there may be a basic question: what is the added value of the structural funds? I don't know whether you have an opinion about this. The European Commission evaluates a lot how the money is spent. And there are, of course, a lot of positive examples. So the structural funds in the European regions have received a lot of very positive impact. What you see here, additional resources could make available with the funds. So the multi-annual planning, partnership, monitoring, and evaluation has turned out as a program life cycle that seems to be very positive and is accepted throughout Europe. We have, by the structural funds, support for other objectives of the European Union, such as the internal market, I called it yesterday the single market, or sustainable development. We have a lot of examples, good projects, and cooperation between the regions. So these are the positive things. And when you go to the European Union website, you see a lot of examples of very good very good projects in the structural funds. And now I've put a very big but here. So there are some negative things. And if you look at this, I believe this reminds you a bit of what I said about IPA. Complexity of management and control structures. We had this before. Too complex administrative procedures. Now, reality on ground can be very variable. This means there are projects that are very good, of course, but there are projects where maybe the results are not achieved, where money is wasted, and actually it is also for the European Commission very difficult to check this. Then the member states deal with the money in a different way. It is unclear if the effects are consistent or attributable to policy, or whether it is simply by accident that a good project happened. Then, what I indicated, monitoring, evaluation by the European Union is difficult. There is so much money involved, there are so many projects, and I must say that the evaluation by the European Union focuses very strongly on the accounting data, which means on the money itself. When you participate in structural funds, also in IPA funds, there is very little monitoring of the real technical results. So the European Commission also admits that they have a difficulty, but because of the many projects, it's at the end also a resource problem. Any question here? So what do I have? Structural funds websites. I think we are at the end. Yeah. Let me just show you this example from Bulgaria. So this is a website where in Bulgaria the structural funds are published. And there's a lot of information. What is important, what you see here, the operational programs. And when you look at this, we have in Bulgaria, seven so-called operational programs in different areas. This is defined for Bulgaria. It could be different in other countries. And you may not be able to read this, but we have here one transport program. We have one environment program, one regional development program, competitiveness program, technical assistance, human resource development, and administrative capacity. So these have been defined by the Bulgarian government, approved by the European Commission, and these programs define now in detail what could be funded by the structural funds in Bulgaria. And there are, for each of these programs, calls for proposals, and the organization can submit proposals, that means apply to get funds for projects. Now the problem here is a little bit that all except one are open only for public authorities. This means if you're working in a company, you can only apply for the so-called competitiveness program. All the other programs are open only if you for those organizations that are in some way public organizations. For example, we have the environment program. Part of this is protection of environment. We have in Bulgaria protected areas, nature parks, and these nature park directorates can apply for this. And of course, during the project, they can subcontract work to companies, but procedures, as experience shows, are not always true. So let me keep this. This is one call for proposals. And this is my last slide now. What happens after 2013? Now what is already defined, the funds will remain the same. So this will not change. The objectives actually will change. They will be based on Europe 2020, and there are 11 thematic priorities, but there will be a similar mapping between objectives and funds. What the European Commission wants to do is to simplify the administrative procedures, and then I would say the names of the type of regions will be different, although when you look at the figures, this will remain the same. We will have less developed regions with less than 75%. We will have transition regions and more developed regions. So these names have changed. So at the end, I would say not much will change. And as I claimed, what I told you, basically the same philosophy will stay with the European Union. Any question?